Hello and welcome to Story Untold. I'm Martin Bauman, and this week I talk to one of the few people on this planet who can say they know what it's like to live on Mars. Martha Lenio is her name. She served as commander on NASA's third high seas mission, which meant spending 8 months way up on a volcano in Hawaii, living as if she was millions of miles from Earth. No cell phones, no internet, no fresh air. Only the luxuries of space travel. It's not the only adventure Martha's been on. She's lived in 5 countries on 4 continents, and she made it as far as the final 72 candidates in the running to be Canada's next astronaut. Here's her story. Not many people can say they know what it's like to live on Mars, and you're one of the few who can say that with some credibility at least. What was the mission? Tell me about the mission that you undertook and what that was.
All right. So the mission that I undertook was, it's called High Seas, the Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation. And it's funded by NASA, run by the University of Hawaii. And what they're trying to get at is how you pick a crew and support a crew for these long duration isolated space missions without, everyone going crazy and killing each other.
So 8 months in Hawaii, I mean, that sounds like a vacation to a lot of people, but you do it in a way that is probably the most uncomfortable way that somebody would spend 8 months in Hawaii. What was it that drew you to living in essentially this giant dome for 8 months and restricting access to outdoors and all that came along with simulating what life on Mars would be like?
For me, I guess, I wanted to kind of see if I could hack it. I thought mentally I could do it, and in the end I could, so that was good. I also thought it would be fun, though, to get to pick my own research project to be working on in the dome, to be involved with the NASA research and hopefully contribute towards a human space mission to Mars in the future. And it's, I know I'm also really into sustainable living. So it's like off-grid, recycling everything, limited water, limited power. So it was, but that part was really fun, too.
So how did you get in? Was this like a job application that you apply for? Or are they seeking people out? What was the process to get involved in this?
Yeah, the whole process was actually 1 year from the time I applied for the job to the time I found out that I had it. So you put in your resume, a cover letter, and a research proposal for what you want to do while you're in there. And then from that, they sent us online aptitude tests. So things like math and science and grammar and stuff, but also things like what qualities do you think make up a good leader? In this kind of conflict situation, what would you do? And then they kind of narrowed it down from there. And then there were Skype interviews and then group Skype interviews. And then the final selection was they took the finalists on a 6-day backpacking trip in Wyoming with the National Outdoor Leadership School. And that was really interesting. They wanted to see how we meshed as a crew. And it was pretty easy camping. The weather was fantastic. We only went 4 or 5 miles a day. But every afternoon we'd stop and we'd kind of do a debrief and then some kind of personality and leadership training. And I actually learned a lot more than I thought I would from that. And then at the end of that, they, picked the final crew and the commander. Yeah.
So in this trip that you're doing in Wyoming, are you with other members of the crew that would eventually make up the high seas mission, or how did it work there?
Yeah, so it was the other potential crew members. So the crew was selected out of that. There were supposed to be 9 of us. Only 8 ended up coming. One girl couldn't come for visa reasons. And then there was a fellow from the University of Hawaii representing the university and NASA. Then we had our leaders from the course. And NASA was taking it seriously because when we arrived for our course, NASA had actually sent a group of actual real astronaut not candidates anymore, but their basic training. That's the sort of stuff that real astronauts do. So they'd sent one of their classes to do a longer backpacking and leadership training course at the same time. So we were there at the same time as the actual NASA astronauts.
Wow. Yeah. So with the backpacking part, are you cooking your own meals, or what does that all entail?
Yeah, I think most Canadians would understand that. It's like a backpacking or canoe trip, right? So you've got all your food packed for 6 days, and you're carrying it on your back through the mountains. I mean, you've got a camping stove and tent and the whole gear, right? So each day they kind of split us into 2 groups, and each person would get to be the leader for the day and have the map and kind of here's our start point, this is the end point, this is when we have to get up in the morning, this is when we're leaving camp. And they swapped the tent groups up as well. So the tent, there was 3 to a tent, And your tent group was your cooking group as well. So they wanted to kind of like see, who's the one, initiating, helping to put the tent up and take it down, and who's like cooking the meals and who's washing the dishes, and how are people dealing with, divvying up chores and all sorts of teamwork stuff like that. Yeah.
And ultimately, that process, not only were you picked to go on the mission, but you were picked as the mission commander. When did you find that out, and what was that initial feeling like to hear that?
It was weird because I went into the course not expecting, not even knowing if I'd make it onto the team as a member of the crew. And I never thought I was a terribly strong leader. But as the week progressed, you learn that there's different kinds of leaders and different types of leadership styles. And I'm more of like a kind of like lead from behind, make sure everyone's okay kind of person. And I learned that that's a totally valid leadership style. And that maybe for this kind of mission, you want someone who's pretty hands-off and capable of bringing out the best in other people. You don't want someone micromanaging you all the time or telling you what to do all the time. So by the end of the week, when we had like a very short questionnaire asking like, who do you want for we had some say like, who do you want for the commander of the mission and who would you vote off the island? And that was like the first time in my life when I've been nominated for something that I actually voted for myself as well. So I actually felt that I was actually the right person for this job. And I think a lot of the other people thought I was too. So that was neat.
I guess if you're going to be cooped up with people for 8 months in a row, you don't want the person who's going to be in control of things to be micromanaging and be a taskmaster. So
that'd be awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were the people that you were doing this with like? What were the personalities involved and some of the people that were on this with you?
It was a pretty big spectrum of personalities. It was really good, actually, that they took us on the camping trip, because before going in, I was like, I know why I want to do this, and I'm a normal person. But all these other people who want to live in a dome for 8 months must be crazy people, and I don't want to live with crazy people for 8 months. But on the camping trip, it turned out like they were all very like, talented, highly motivated people, great sense of humor. It just happens, that we all want to be astronauts. So I was like, okay, you guys are all normal people. I can handle living with you guys for 8 months. But we had everything like from like extreme introverts to extroverts, and everything in between.
And what were both the countries represented and the professional backgrounds or disciplines represented amongst that group?
So I was the only Canadian. Everyone else was American, but Alan Mirkadirov was originally from Azerbaijan, so he was like our token Russian. He only moved to the States when he was like 15 or 16, I think. In terms of profession, 3 of us were mechanical engineers or had some kind of tie to mechanical engineering. So myself, Zach Wilson, and Sophie Milam. Neil Scheibelhut he's a former medic in the U.S. Army, so he was like our crew medical officer, and he's also a biologist as like an undergrad and was doing a master's now in microbiology. Jocelyn Dunn was kind of our crew scientist. She was working on a PhD in data science, so like kind of like like engineering, but with like stress and health as well. And then Alan was a Air Force officer and works for NASA Goddard as well. So yeah.
So I've seen pictures of the dome, but how would you describe, if you could paint the picture of what the living quarters are like, the space that you're spending 8 months in? What is it like? What are the rooms involved? How cramped does it feel? All of those sorts of things.
So it's not going to sound like a lot. It didn't feel as cramped, but it's about 1,000 square feet, the whole dome living space, with an additional shipping container tacked on for storage. But so the dome is like, we call it the dome because it's dome shaped. It's a round kind of like bubble. The main floor is round and set out with like there's like a kitchen area, then kind of like a dining area and workspace with some tables set up for computers. But all the tables can be easily folded out of the way, and we can put in like workout equipment then, and we can all work out, all 6 of us together as a crew, and then we can move that out of the way and put up like a couch and some chairs and have a movie night. So it was really quite modular. Like the space that was there was flexible, so we didn't feel too cramped. We had a washroom on the main floor and a lab space that was quite small. I had an indoor garden going in the lab space. The bathroom is not quite like a normal bathroom in that we're conserving water, so the toilets are composting toilets. They don't flush or anything. So that's a bit more maintenance. And then there was a small upper level where we had our bedrooms. So there was like kind of like, again, like it's a circular floor. So we had like pie-shaped wedges for bedrooms. they're quite small. Like Neil was over, I think he was like 6'2" or 6'3". So the way they were set up, like he couldn't stretch out flat on the bed. So we actually had to rearrange his room so that he would be able to lay down flat at night. So that's the kind, like that's how tight the rooms are.
You actually got your own rooms that you're not sharing with other. Okay.
We each had our own rooms with like, you know, but again, like the walls were like quite thin. So even if you were in your room alone, like there's no windows, but there were like air vents and stuff so that air would get in there. And if you could be sitting in your room trying to get alone time and still hear the conversation going on in the kitchen and hear the conversation going on in the lab. So for like 8 months, you also really don't have the luxury of a private conversation.
You mentioned a garden too. What was growing in the garden?
Mostly like lettuce, tomatoes, lots and lots of different kinds of herbs. It was partly for research, but partly I just wanted to grow as many different types of vegetables and herbs as I could, just because that was the only fresh food we had.
And this is stuff that you could actually do on Mars, the growing that you were doing?
Yep. And they do growing on the space station too. Unlike us, where I like grow things, measure them, and then we'd eat them all. Only this past year have they actually let the astronauts eat what they've been growing in space. Like up till now, I think they've been growing all this like tomatoes and lettuce and stuff in space and then sending it back down to Earth to get analyzed. It must just be so frustrating to have these beautiful tomatoes there and then have to send them back down to Earth.
The first fresh food you see, and it's just gone. Oh man! So you've mentioned already the lack of privacy that you had during this time. What were the things that you would do during free time then, and sort of the parameters as far as did you have access to a paper or internet or TV shows or Netflix or or any of these comforts, or how are you entertaining yourselves when you weren't doing work?
So we didn't have the internet. You would not have the internet on Mars. That's one of the things they kept true to the simulation. All our communications were on a 20-minute delay. So you could email, mission support or your family or something, and it would take 20 minutes for that email to get there. And then if they decided to reply, it would be 20 minutes for a response. So it's like 40 minutes to like an hour round trip for a conversation exchanges. You can't search the web. So we would often we would request news articles, or we would request Last Week Tonight or The Daily Show or something to get sent in, and sometimes it would get sent, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes things were too hard to get. And then if you were trying to do research as well, it was very difficult. Joss was working on her literature review for her thesis when she was in there, and she would be like, can someone find me these 3 papers? And then an hour later someone would send her those papers, and that's not what you're looking for. So then she'd be like, okay, how about these 3 papers? Now can you send? So it's doing a Google search is taking days and days to find what you need.
So do you have a DVD player then, or something that with DVDs that had already been brought to watch, or TV shows?
Yeah, everyone brought stuff in with them, and we were the 3rd mission, so we kind of had the legacy of what everyone before us had also brought in. So we had a terabyte of movies, TV shows, music, ebooks, all sorts of stuff. What
was the movie, if there was one or two, or show that people kept on going back to over those 8 months?
We did Game of Thrones for a while. That got pretty intense. Some people had to stop watching. It was an intense season, that one. And of course, it would be on delay. So we'd have to be don't tell us what happens, guys. It's not out on Mars yet. And then ones that were more, successful, everyone loved was Flight of the Conchords. Something really funny and music and yeah.
What about as far as the actual work that you were doing there goes? What was the goal, more or less, of what you were doing, and what did that involve on a day-to-day basis?
So for NASA, this was a psychology experiment. They want to know, how our relationships, or whether, we get depressed or stressed out, how that evolves over time. So there were 6 different research groups studying us. One from Michigan. So for Michigan State University, that involved 3 surveys a day, wearing these sociometer badges that measure your proximity to each other, so they can tell, who you're sitting beside, what the light levels are, what the sound volume is, if you're yelling at each other or something, if someone's locking themselves in the room and not interacting with people all the time. One of them involved us taking videos before and after we would go on these EVAs, extravehicular activities, to go explore the area. And we didn't know what they were doing at the time, but it turns out they were looking at our body language and how that evolved over the course of the mission to see whether people were becoming like antagonistic or standoffish, or if people were still open to communication, pretty much based off body language. And the reason they're doing these just like quick surveys or looking at your body language or like tracking like sound levels is that they want to figure out how, like what's going on in the hab without having to directly ask the astronauts how they're feeling. Astronauts tend to be very, they're stoic. They really want to go to space. And that means sometimes they're not very honest. Mm-hmm. So if you ask them, how's everything going? They'll be like, everything's fine. And they'll keep saying, yep, I can do the work. I can handle more. Everything's fine, until all of a sudden it's not fine. And then it's really, really bad. Mm-hmm. And so they're looking for these other ways of getting indicators of, if there's problems coming up without directly having to ask.
So you sign up for this to simulate life on Mars, and you end up being a sort of a lab rat, almost like a psychology experiment. Did you know how much of that aspect of the testing it was going to be going into it, or did you kind of pick up more as it went along?
I knew, the whole point, it's a psychology experiment, right? So there were, all told, there was over 40 surveys a week, and there was journals, and there was, little tests and tasks and things to do throughout the week. So it did take up, a good chunk of our time. But at the same time, they have to make us feel that we're on Mars in order for this to work. So we did do geology exploration experiments and write reports and send them back. We did have other research projects like the garden or 3D printing, things that you would be doing on Mars. And then we did try and schedule downtime too, so that we, have some fun as a crew and not get totally stressed out.
So when you're doing these EVAs, what are you putting on to simulate what it would be like to, leave an actual dome or some sort of controlled environment and actually get out into the planet itself?
Yeah. So again, to make us feel that we're on Mars, you can't go outside the dome unless you're protected in a spacesuit. So we had two kind of spacesuits. One was kind of like a janky hazmat suit that had fan and battery pack and stuff. But the other was a pretty true representation of what a spacesuit would be like and feel like on Mars. So it weighed about 60 pounds all told, which is about, when you take into account the difference between our gravity and Mars's gravity, what it would feel like a spacesuit would weigh on Mars. It had a cooling tank and a cooling vest and a large pump and a large battery that would pump the chilled water through the vest to keep you cool during the EVA. And there was a big fan forcing air into the helmet so that you could breathe.
That's very thorough.
Yeah.
What about the food that you're eating in these 8 months? How is it prepared? What does it taste like? Did it get tiring?
Yeah, so the food, it has to last, a Mars mission would be about a 3-year mission, so the food has to last 3 years. Everything's got to be shelf stable for that time. So everything's freeze-dried or dehydrated or, in a can. So I was actually really worried about the food coming in, that it would just be really bland or gross, and we'd get so sick of it by the end of the mission. But the way we split up the dinner duties was that everyone had to cook once a week. And since we were pretty competitive and you only had to cook once a week, when it was someone's turn to cook, they'd really go all out. So we had almost no repeat meals for 8 months. And we did pho and falafels and sushi and pizza nights. We had burger nights. People got really, really creative with the foods, and we had some really great dinners.
What did you find to be the most interesting takeaway, or some of the most interesting takeaways from your time in an 8-month Mars simulation?
I think everyone got something quite different, out of the experience. I personally, in terms of social abilities and skills, I guess, I was pretty confident in my abilities going in. So I guess I kind of, being the oldest of 5 kids, I've kind of, and babysitting everyone in the neighborhood growing up, I've got a pretty strong mom ability. So towards the end of the mission, we had 6 months really easy. The last 6 weeks were insane, but I felt like I really took my mom ability to another level, basically with the emotional care of everyone around me, and we all get it and we're all still friends. So I was pretty proud of that. In terms of, can we live sustainably on another planet? No, we're not there yet. So people talk about colonizing Mars. We're not going to colonize Mars. We don't know how to sustainably live on Earth, and Earth recycles everything for us. We don't have to do anything, and Earth will take care of itself. On Mars, you have to do everything, and we don't have that figured out. We generate so much waste. So even living in a dome on Mars, we would generate like 1 or 2 bags of garbage a week, and we can't buy anything. Like, this is just us living in a dome. It's like just single-use things that we just throw out. So that was... Solar energy was really easy to live on. So I was very happy that I was able to show the crew how easy that is. Yeah, waste management, we have not figured that out.
It's one thing to, so to speak, leave Earth and go to Mars, but then to come back from that experiment and to reintegrate yourself into the world after all that time and to notice those sorts of things again, the wastefulness that we come to so naturally.
Yeah.
What were the sort of things that you picked up on and just thought, wow, this feels really strange now that I'm back in this world again?
The strangest thing was getting used to like instant communication again. That was by far the hardest. It was much easier going into the dome than coming out. You just get used to, you send an email and you don't expect to hear it from anyone for an hour. So getting out again and like I'd send an email to someone and they'd respond within less than a minute. I'd be like, whoa, like I wasn't actually ready to talk to you. I was just getting ready for it in like an hour. I was thinking, just starting to think about being ready to talk to you. So, and people like phoning me too. It's like, I'd be driving or in the washroom or in the library and not able to answer the phone and like freak out because I'm like, oh, I can't talk to you. And now I just hang up on people and it doesn't matter. But
you were there. What was the exact time frame of when you left and when you came back on this experiment, the sort of the months that encompassed?
So the experiment started October. I think we went in on like the 12th or 13th of October, 2014. And then we got out June 13th, 2015.
So that, I guess what I was getting towards there is you're encompassing Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving and American Thanksgiving, Christmas, you're encompassing Easter, a lot of times when you would be with friends and family.
Yeah.
What did you do in place of that with your crew and your mission members?
Yeah, we were the first crew that was in there for pretty much every major holiday. So we celebrated every holiday that we could. We celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas. We celebrated Russian Orthodox Christmas, New Year's, Chinese New Year's, we celebrated Australia Day. And it was really important to make time to do these celebrations because in the dome there's not like the way Zach phrased it once was that there are no good surprises in the dome. Every day is the same as the next. And if there's a surprise, it's going to be a bad one, probably because something broke down. And that's what breaks up the monotony. And so every day kind of blends into the next. And you kind of lose track of time. You lose a sense of time. So having these celebrations throughout the year was really important to, have fun as like a family or dome family and help, feel like, you had markers for passage of time again.
Who were when you were doing this high seas mission, a lot of people from different corners of the world were taking notice of this. Who are some of the people that you heard from, whether it's people prominent in the science field or just prominent Canadians or people you just didn't think you'd hear from?
Mostly it was like family and friends, that I'd be in communication with. There was like a couple times through my blog or through like some of the outreach we did that we had some really neat connections. So like for Earth Day, NASA does a thing at in the Washington DC Mall or something. And so we made a video on challenging people to live like they were on Mars for the day and conserving water, conserving energy, and stuff like that. And we had like a school in Virginia picked it up for like a unit they were doing on water conservation, and having like all these interactions with these students in Virginia was actually really neat. So I don't know, stuff like that.
So is that the?
Yeah, Obama tweeted me once.
Yeah. That's what we want to know.
Oh yeah, Obama tweeted me once, but it wasn't for me. Our mission. I always think that it was for the 1 year mission. Part of the study was to see the effects of time too. So there's a 4-month mission. Our mission was the 8-month mission, and then there was a 12-month mission following up, and they have like the record for like longest analog in the States or whatever. And the picture that Obama tweeted to congratulate them was a photo of me. So I always think that the crew 4 must be so annoyed that I was their poster child.
That's good. One thing we haven't talked about even yet is what got you interested in space in the first place. When you first kind of thought, this is what I want to spend as much time as possible devoting my life towards.
I like exploration. I like having a good challenge. I like living in different interesting living situations. And like I read up on like the kind of things that you need to do to be able to be an astronaut. And it's like, stay fit and do sports and do science and engineering and learn languages. And I was like, well, I like doing all of these things and I don't want to just choose one. If I can just do all of them, and it still sets me up well for being an astronaut.
And how young were you when you started going through this step-by-step checklist of what do I need to do to get on that path?
Thinking like around grade 8, grade 9, I like started seriously thinking about it. And then like in grade 9, they ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like, I think I like to be an astronaut. And no one said that I couldn't. So I was like, okay, maybe I actually could be an astronaut. And yeah.
Now that it's been since you got back, there's been some time between your return to let it percolate and think about how that experience was. How do you look back on it, on those 8 months now, and your time cramped in this dome with a bunch of strangers, and how it all went?
It's pretty special, to work on a team with like such highly skilled, highly motivated, really, fun to be with people. Like that's a really special kind of experience. A lot of teams are a lot more of a struggle. And we had a really good first 6 months. It was like, honestly, like everyone was like just so motivated and talented. I'd kind of point them in the right direction and they'd just take off with things. And I'd be like, wow, this is like the easiest management job ever. Like everyone does everything better than I asked them to do it. And we have a lot of fun, and everyone's got a great sense of humor along the way. So we did have like a stressful last 2 months or 6 weeks, I guess. But even then, like we always pulled together as a crew. We always did all the stuff for NASA, like with 100% compliance. So they never actually realized how stressed out we were until we got out. And with a week to go at the end, we had like a big pizza party and we danced and had like karaoke and stuff. And we're all silly. And then we had like a really great last week in the dome together, just finishing everything up and cleaning everything up. And towards the end, like after we're out and after the debrief, like no one really wants to leave either. Everyone, no one else really understands what we've gone through. So like, to talk, they're the only people I can talk to really if I want someone who really understands how challenging that was.
What was the moment like when you can finally leave the dome without wearing one of these clunky suits and you can feel the air on your skin again and hear things and see things that you haven't seen in months?
It was amazing. Like it was getting out. I was really nervous at first because just we haven't seen people in so long. So it was like worried that we'd just be overwhelmed. But then, yeah, when we stepped out the door and had this beautiful, crisp view of Mauna Loa, not through like some scratchy spacesuit visor, and could feel the wind on our skin, like that was just amazing. Just like the crispness of everything was amazing. They asked us, like we had one survey, like at the end of the day, every day they asked us, what are you missing most? What are you missing most? And at first it's like, family and friends, sun and wind. And like at one point I missed YouTube videos. I didn't expect to miss YouTube videos, but I did. But I think the thing that I missed the most in the end was trees. I just like miss the sound of trees and the way light filters through trees. And I don't know, I just like missed everything about trees. I remember like sitting in the AGO in like the members lounge after I got out, and I was like, I'm in this, like it's beautiful, but I'm in this like stuffy tea room and all these pictures on the walls are of like trees and oceans and mountains. It's like, why am I not just in trees and oceans and mountains all the time?
More recently, you made it all the way down to a short list of 72 people that were in line to be Canada's next astronaut. Over 3,700 people applied for this position. What was that process like for you in even just getting to that stage of this gigantic pool of people?
I did apply like 10 years ago when they had the last call and made it to the second round. So like the first was just kind of screening, and the second was a way more thorough application looking at like your entire background. They changed it this time. So that really, really thorough, look into your background and your experience was the first selection, I guess, this time. And I wanted, since that's probably just going to get run through a computer, I wanted to make it really, really good. So it took me like 6 weeks and ended up being like 33 pages long. And I had it edited by like family and friends. And then actually one of the researchers from High Seas helped edit it as well, like multiple times, just because I know like this is like this is the real bar if you have to get through this like computer screening program probably before you even get anywhere. So making it through that, I almost felt like it was like the biggest hurdle, just because there's so many people to stand out against. Then you have to write the public service entrance exam, which all federal employees have to write, which was very similar to that online testing for high seas. There was like a 1.5 hour aptitude test, so math and sciencey type questions, logic, and an 1.5 hour judgment test. Again, all online, all computer stuff. So once you made it past those two, I guess once you made it past the computer, then it got narrowed down to like about 160 or so, 100. And then there was the medical checks and then the flight exam. So all the medical stuff. Then there was the security checks. They had to check like everywhere you've worked for the past 10 years. You need background checks from any country that you've lived in longer than 6 months. So this actually was another really intensive process for me to get all this paperwork together. And then finally, once you made it through all that, then you were part of the final 72. I felt more like if I'd made it through those first 2 tests, I felt I had a shot at getting to the final 72. But yeah, those first 2 were the harder ones, I think.
Let's say a commercial venture to space becomes possible, whether that's a space station or something of that nature. Are you signing up for something like that? Or what would it take for you to go on a trip like that?
I'm not interested in a one-way mission. I'd go and I'd come back, partly because I don't think we can live sustainably on another planet. So a one-way mission is very much one way and probably not for very long. And I would like to come back because I think I'd like to share that experience with people back here. I think people back here would like to share that experience with me. So I know that space agencies are planning for return trips. I'm not sure about private agencies if they're doing the same. So
one thing that is really cool, I think, about this whole thing too is just still this idea that when you think about across science and in the STEM and space exploration, there's still not a lot of young girls that are a part of that. So for you to be able to be a model for kids and see you simulating a Mars mission, for kids to see the sorts of experiments that went on there. What is that like to be able to have kids look at you and say, I could do this too?
I think that's pretty amazing. I think definitely girls should feel they should belong here, and it's a lot of fun. It's definitely worth doing. You never know, going into engineering, it's I never knew I didn't even know what engineering was when I went into it. And it's taken me to so many interesting, fun places now that, I'd never do anything differently. And so I think, and having women, they are specifically looking for having a mixed male-female crew to go to Mars, because both men and women bring something to the table. Two of the guys on my crew instantly said they would not have signed up for the mission if it was going to be all men. They would not have signed up. And again, with an all-women crew, people throw around that idea too. I wouldn't think that would be fun. I think we both have strengths and weaknesses, and we complement each other, and we work best as a team. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. That's it for the show. Thanks for listening, and I hope you liked it. Martha, by the way, was also my babysitter as a kid. If you like the show, it's on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher. Go ahead and subscribe. You can help me out by leaving a rating too, or pass it along to someone you think might enjoy it. Theme music for the show is by Dr. Turtle off the album You I'll Ah. I'm Martin Bauman, and this was A Story Untold. See you next time.